welcome to We're the Greers. Feels sort of strange to be here with you without Charlotte with me, but this is our first, or my first attempt at doing what we sort of have cleverly named Fatherly Fridays. I want to sort of tell you the heart behind it, and then today I'm going to sort of tell you how I ended up here as it sort of goes along with this subject. But basically, Fatherly Fridays, the biggest thing that I want to convey or be able to do through this is really address what I think is one of the largest social or the most important social issues that's facing our country right now, which is fatherlessness. And some stats on that is right now more than 25% of children live without a father. Now this is a physical father, a biological father, stepfather, adopted father, something like that. Now this more than 25% of our children in the U.S. today, like these children have a 5-time greater risk to live in poverty. They're going to have more behavioral issues. They're more likely to go to prison, to commit a crime, to deal with abuse sometime through their childhood. They're twice as likely to drop out of high school, and then the young ladies are 7 times more likely to become pregnant, all because there's not a father in the home to sort of guide them through childhood, adolescence, and things like that. And then I want to just, pretty big deal, but I just want to sort of today talk about like how I ended up here and how this became a passion of mine and sort of an idea of what this time may look like on Fridays each week. But my name is Benjamin. I grew up in upstate of South Carolina, spent my entire life here. Pretty normal upbringing, other than crazy, positive or negative, but just, sort of just a normal kid, loving life, playing sports and things like that. In 1995, I would have been about 16 then. We had casually attended church, but church was more of a tradition or an occurrence, something that we just sort of did on Sunday. But I still remember there was a time, like I played sports, and then there was a period where the guys that were in the youth group that I went to a church camp, and then I had a sports camp, football camp that week, so I wasn't able to go. Well, I saw those guys come back, and like, man, they just had like this hope and this joy and this peace that I just had never noticed before. And that sort of led me to begin to ask questions about like, wow, they're doing these things that seem unusual, but like I've known these guys for a while. They're not like super weird or anything. And they're happy about it. And there's like this joy that, I can't exactly explain. But that led me to asking questions and eventually led to like my salvation, professing Jesus as my Lord and Savior when I was 16-ish. From there, life was pretty good for a period of time. I got sort of hooked up with that group of guys, 2 guys in particularly, and I remember sort of, having some small spiritual gains during that time. As that year drew to a close, a couple of those guys graduated high school and went off to college, but really my community began to change. And slowly and just ever so slightly, my behaviors began to change as well. And then that led, really for the next 15 years of my life, just living a very worldly life, really a selfish life of like just doing the things that I wanted to do, or doing the things that I wanted people to see me doing as well. And it wasn't until about 2010 that I got back into community, back into a local church, but more than that, into like godly community. Now, one of the questions I get a lot about my salvation story is like, wow, like, are you sure you really got saved? Like, how can you have a salvation experience, but then live 15 years of your life, like not, pursuing God or following God or living a life that resemble that of a Christian? And my answer to that is always like, I know what I experienced that day, and something shifted in my life that day. Slowly over time, because I didn't have community and I didn't have folks to encourage me and challenge me, I slowly took small step after small step after small step that took me further and further away from God. And as I did that, my heart just hardened. And the things that would convict me before just didn't. And as I would sin over and over again, each time it became easier. And so I'm very confident that was my salvation, but I also know that without a group, a community, and for me, a community of guys to hold me accountable to the truths of the Bible, it was very, very easy to fall off track. But 2010, we sort of get back into community at this point. Charlotte and I are married. And for the first time in my life, I see what I would call like godly manhood. And this was a guy that was probably 5 years older than I was. Super, super different. Like, I'm laid back, pretty, just simple guy. And he was really scholarly and smart and, like really dug in the Bible. And I sort of like surface level read the Bible at that time. And, but like, I just remember like when I read through the fruits of the Spirit that like I could see kindness and gentleness and faithfulness and patience and love and joy and self-control. I could see those things in this guy as I began to interact with him. And that really gave me a spiritual mentor, which gave me something to sort of work towards, other than like what the Bible was teaching me. Like, I had an example like right here in front of me to sort of go and to see him live and make mistakes and turn from them and do those things was just huge. And that was 2010. And after that, I sort of made sure that like I had that community, like that as I moved and shifted and things changed in my life, that I, even before I would make a move, that I sort of set up to have like godly, manly community to be around, just to hold me accountable to two things. 2013, we were sitting in a church service, and I really felt this call into some non-traditional type of ministry. And to this day, I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe this is it. Who knows? And really began to sort of like really start to seek and dig in to like God and His Word and the Bible and what that was to look like for my life. Then fast forward 2 years, in 2015, we had a lot of changes. We just had our fourth child. We had moved twice, and I was working, a 50, 60 hour a week job. So things were really hectic, and I got just burned out. And I ended up doing basically what was a men's retreat, week-long, no cell phone. We flew out to South Texas, and it was just on a huge ranch, and it was really like, here guys, take off, run around, play, try to hear from your Father, hear from God. And that was the first time that life slowed down enough for me to hear like the subtleties of God's voice, His whispers. And it was the first time I began to see God as a Father, not as a creator, and not as like this sort of scary Old Testament type God, but like as a God that I could like get really close to, that wanted me to like draw close to Him, and that like a Father that like loved me perfectly and unconditionally. And that was really awesome, and that shifted a lot of the way I viewed Christianity as a religion, but just like how I was going to live my life. The way I sort of like to word it is like, it was 1995 when I experienced salvation, but it wasn't until 20 years later till I actually began to experience the freedom that like a life of following Jesus allows you to have. During that trip, one of the things I really wanted was like, all right, God, like, tell me this ministry thing. What's this thing supposed to look like? And I remember the last day I was there, we were flying out that afternoon, and I was like just praying, like, God, tell me something. And as clearly as I have ever heard the voice of the Lord, He said, any great thing I have for you starts with your family. And so that made sense, right? That's my first ministry. So we come on from there, and I start to focus on like being a great husband and a good leader at work, but also great with the kids and things like that. And then that's really was a journey into like me and my family and my wife and those things, but also into like intimacy with God. Like, what does that look like? And I began to learn that like, hey, I can hear those subtle whispers throughout my workday, and I can commune with God like at my kitchen table. And I just really gained a huge confidence in some of the promises that God makes, that if we seek Him and seek Him with our whole heart, that like He can be found. He desires to be found, and He's not a hidden God that we just have to seek, and seek is a very active word in that connotation. So sort of, working through that and just doing that and learning a lot and being challenged and changing my views. Really, that was a season of renewal, where a lot of the sins that I'd experienced, that I'd done, that had been done to me, that like God began to just sanctify a lot of that and began to put it in context of like who He was and who He said that I was. And back in August of 2019, I really felt like God was like, all right, it's time to leave your job. And I knew that that was coming. I just didn't really know when. And we had planned it for much further out than when it had happened. But, following takes faith. And my assumption was I was going to do that. I was going to stay home for a little bit and then start my own business or, get back in the workforce. It wasn't going to be a long period. Had been home about 2 weeks and sort of the excitement had worn off. And I was like, we homeschool our children. And I was like, I really want to start like teaching the boys math. That'll be fun. And immediately I began to just see, like God opened my eyes to their heart. And some of the things that, at 5 years old and 8-year-olds they were struggling with and things that I didn't see. And things about like how the way I spoke with them would like tear them down or intimidate them or scare them and these things. And God really made it clear within those first 2 weeks that like, hey, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be taken care of and resolved here. And how this goes back to the fatherlessness is the stats that I gave you, those are dads that are physically unpresent. I was a dad that was physically present, but spiritually I was not present for my children to the degree that God calls me to be. And like I see and feel that with a ton of folks that I interact with on a daily basis, that we as dads feel like our priority is to like protect and provide for, which is very true. But our eyes see the world and we see that protection is like from a predator, right, that we can see, and that provision is through financial things. And what God has really shown me over the last 6 months is, yes, I have a responsibility to those, but that comes after I spiritually prepare the way for my children each day and for life. And that comes after, I emotionally take care of their needs and after I spiritually provide for them and give them those things. And that's really where what got me here now, and then why this is so important to me is I would have said 8 months ago I was doing well and felt like I was doing well, and it wasn't until life slowed down enough for me to really like see the hearts of my children and for me to make changes and see how quickly like God just allowed me to see like changes in their behavior and the way they express themselves, and it just really opened me up to how deprived they were of some things that I should have been giving them for years that I just never did. So from this, God has sort of given me this vision statement that will take me wherever it is that He has me to go. But it is basically it is my desire to walk with men into the freedom and authority available to all of us in Jesus Christ. And that's the overarching theme of the things that I'll be talking about each week. Don't know what's to come each week. It'll be sort of things that I encounter in my own personal time and in life, and stories, and try to keep it real, as well as other things that pop up and things that God has shown me in the past. So that's what this is going to look like. I'm super excited and really just honored to be able to share this with you guys, and I'll try to keep them as short as possible to appreciate and take care of you guys' time. But you will see Shirley again on Monday. I appreciate you tuning in today. If you'd like, please subscribe. That way you can get these as soon as they come out, and that would help encourage us as well. Have a great weekend.